and welcome to this video. We will be looking at the Form N-400, which is the application for naturalization. We will be completing this form to submit to apply for citizenship or to become a U.S. citizen. We're going to start at the section here that says Start Here. You're going to read the information. If you do not answer all of the questions, it may take longer for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, to process your Form N-400. We're going to be completing this form in the capacity of the spouse of a U.S. citizen. So we come at Part 1, Question 1, and we're going to select this box. That's 1B. Before we get to 1B, we're actually going to put in our 9-digit alien number. At the time of applying for U.S. citizenship, you would be most likely to have an alien number. You would find this number on previous documents that you would have received from the USCIS. Continuing here, so all the sections in Question 1 that are not applicable to you would be A, C, D, E, F, and G. For any spaces that are not applicable to you, you're going to put not applicable or NA. The software that I used to complete this did not allow me to type that in, so you could just write this in if you are not able or allowed to do so while you're completing your form. And this form, by the way, is being completed to be submitted via mail. It's not going to be submitted online. So for these sections, after you print, you could put NA and NA, indicating not applicable. Part 2, number 1, this is where the applicant's last name, first name, and middle name will be typed. Other names you have used since birth. If you have used any other name since birth, this is where you're going to put those names. So this is the section for last name. So if you are a female and you were using a maiden name only prior to being married, as in this case, this person is now Davis Brown. And we're treating Davis as a maiden name and Brown as the applicant's married name. So for here, you're going to put your maiden name only, since you were going only by this name prior to being married. In this instance, this applicant was not going by any other first name or middle name. So that means that she always had this first name and middle name. Moving on. For each section, each page where the A number is required or alien number, you're going to either write it in or type it in. Again, the system did not allow me to type this in for the subsequent pages. So for each page, you want to type in the alien number or write in the alien number. In the event that your pages become separated while being reviewed at the USCIS, they would be able to link back the particular page to your file or application. Moving on, information about you. Person applying for naturalization continued. Read the instructions for this item number before you decide whether you would like to legally change your name. So if you would like to change your name, this is where you would be able to state the name the new name that you would like to go by. So you're going to indicate whether you would like to or not. If you would like to change your name, you're going to indicate yes here. If you would not like to change your name, you're going to select no and skip to part 4 or number 4. If you're going to change your name, you're going to be required to place a last name, a first name, and a middle name. So in other words, your new name would be provided in these spaces. Again, last, first, and middle. Continuing to 4, USCIS online account number, if any. Usually, if you had filed an application online before or received a number beginning with IOE, that would usually be your USCIS online, or you may not have filed online, but may have created an account, so you would have an online account number. And for that, you would place that here. In this instance, the applicant has none, so we indicate as such in the space. The applicant here is a female, and whatever your gender is, you select as applicable. The applicant's date of birth is required here. You start with a month, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, and 4-digit year. Read as you go along to make sure that you are providing the required information. In addition to your actual date of birth, include any other dates of birth you have ever used, including dates used in connection with any legal names or non-legal names, in the space provided in Part 14. Part 14 is where you provide all additional information if you are not able to provide them in this section of the form. If you are a lawful permanent resident, provide the date you became a lawful permanent resident. You're going to provide that date here, a 2-digit month, a 2-digit day, and a 4-digit year. You're going to place your country of birth here, country of citizenship or nationality. You're just applying for US citizenship, so you would need to place your country that you're coming or you came from to be in the United States, if that's your country of citizenship, or whichever country is your country of citizenship, but it would not be the USA since you are just applying to become a US citizen. If you are a citizen or national of more than one country, list additional countries of nationality in the space provided in Part 14, and that would be the additional information section. Number 10. Was one of your parents, including adoptive parents, a U.S. citizen before your 18th birthday? This applicant is no. If you are applying for citizenship, that would suggest that you are not a U.S. citizen. However, if this is yes, the answer to this question is yes. And let me read what they have here. That will be self-explanatory. If you answered yes, you may already be a U.S. citizen. If you are a U.S. citizen, you should not complete Form N-400, and rightly so. When you complete Form N-400, you are applying to become a U.S. citizen. So if you are already a U.S. citizen, then it would not be applicable or relevant to you to complete this form. Do you have a physical or developmental disability or mental impairment that prevents you from demonstrating your knowledge and understanding of the English language or civics requirements for naturalization? In this case, it's no. However, if you answered yes, submit a completed form N648 which is medical certification for disability exceptions when you file your Form N-400. See the Naturalization Testing and Exception section of the instructions for additional information about exceptions from the English language test, including exceptions based on age and years as a lawful permanent resident. Social Security Update 12A. Do you want the Social Security Administration to issue you an original or replacement Social Security card and update your immigration status with the SSA if and when you are naturalized? So you can opt to say yes or no. This is basically asking if you would like to apply for a new Social Security card via this application, because at this stage you would need an updated, if you are approved for citizenship, you would need to update your Social Security information. So instead of you doing that yourself, separate and apart, after you receive your citizenship, what they are basically saying, if you are approved, the USCIS, would submit that application on your behalf. So this basically is serving two purposes. It would be serving your application for N-400 naturalization or for becoming a US citizen, and also to apply for an updated Social Security, since the one that you would have been using as a permanent resident would be tied to your permanent resident status. And so it would be a good idea for you to select yes to have them apply for that on your behalf. If you would not like that to happen, then you are going to select no, and you move on according to your selection. So in this case, we selected yes. So we are going to complete item numbers 12B and 12C. 12B, provide your Social Security number. And this is where you would place that number. And they say, if any. Usually once you are applying for citizenship, it's likely that you would have already had a Social Security number. But if for whatever reason you do not have one, then you would put none right here. 12C, consent for disclosure. I authorize disclosure of information from this application and USCIS systems to the SSA as required for the purpose of assigning me an SSN, issuing me an original or replacement Social Security card, and updating my immigration status with the SSA. So once you have consented or agreed for the USCIS to submit the application to the Social Security office on your behalf, then you would want to select yes. Note, if you answered yes to item 12A, you must also answer yes to item number 12C, consent for disclosure to receive a card. Moving on. Part 3, biographic information. Reminder, always put your alien number here. Note, USCIS requires you to complete the categories below to conduct background checks. Ethnicity, select only one box. So you're going to indicate whether you are Hispanic or Latino or not Hispanic or Latino. Race, select your applicable race. Select your write in or type in your height, your weight, eye color, hair color. So you're going to select as applicable to you. Part 4, information about your residence. Physical addresses. List every location where you have lived during the last 5 years if you are filing based on the general provision under Part 1. So in the general provision, that would not be applicable to us. For more information on this, I strongly recommend that you visit the USCIS website at www.uscis.gov to get the information specifics on what's required based on your category of applicant. In this case, this is being filed on behalf of a permanent resident who is married to a U.S. citizen. So it's the spouse of a U.S. citizen. In that case, this person would just be required to list every location she would have lived during the last 3 years. So if you are the spouse of a U.S. citizen applying for citizenship, you would be required to only list your addresses, physical addresses for the last 3 years. Continuing, current physical address in care of name, if any. In this case, it's not applicable, so we put any here. Street number and name, so we place that information here. This applicant has an apartment, and since we were not allowed to type in this, once this form is printed, we would write it in, and we're always going to write that in with a black ink pen. So this is self-explanatory. City or town, the province not applicable, postal code not applicable, country, USA, state, zip code. Dates of residence from. So this applicant has been living at this address since August 26 of 2024, and this would be the current address you are starting with. So if you notice, this says from August 26, 2024 to present, and this is auto-filled on the USCIS website because that is the information you are capturing here of your current residence. In this space provided, this is now where you are going to account for any additional addresses over the required period. So in this case, we are accounting for the last 3 years. Since this first address or current address did not meet the criteria, and I mean, if this applicant rather, was living at this address, the current address, for at least 3 years, then that would be enough. We would not need to put any additional address in this box. So instead, we would indicate not applicable in these spaces. Since that's not the case, we are going to fill in information in this box. So we see that the applicant was living at this address as of this date, May 25th, 2019 to August 25th, 2024. So this period here covers the 3-year period that we are looking for. So that would be sufficient. In that case, we would not need to fill out any more spaces. So we could always put not applicable in these boxes. We could either type it or write it in with a black ink pen after the form is printed. Is your current physical address also your current mailing address? In this case, it is yes. If you have a different situation, then you would select the correct response. Part 4, information about your residence. And this is continuing from the previous section. So again, we have already satisfied the 3-year requirement. We would not put any additional information here. That's why we placed NA or not applicable in the spaces. Again, remember to always type in or write in your alien number Part 5. Information about your marital history. What is your current marital status or status? In this case, the applicant is married. If you have a different status, then you would select the one that is appropriate or applicable to you. If you are single and have never been married and have never married, go to Part 6, information about your children. We are continuing with question 2. If you are currently married, is your spouse a current member of the U.S. Armed Forces? The applicant in this case is no. How many times have you been married? See the specific instructions by item number section of the instructions for more information about which marriages to include. So this is referring you back to the general information and instructions found at www.uscis.gov. The applicant in this case has only been married once. We indicate that here. Provide current marriage certificate and any divorce decree, annulment decree, or death certificate showing that your prior marriages were terminated if applicable. So since this applicant is married and her spouse is alive and they are still together, then this applicant would need to provide current marriage certificate. For divorced persons, you would provide a divorce decree, and for any annulment situations, you would provide the annulment decree. Any death situations, you would provide a death certificate. These would be considered supporting documents with your application. If you are filing under one of the categories below, answer item number 4A to 8. Spouse of U.S. citizen. So this is the category of this applicant. So we are going to be answering numbers 4A to 8. Number 4A, your current marriage. If you are currently married, including if you are legally separated, provide the following information about your spouse, your current spouse. So this is self-explanatory. Current spouse's legal name. So we see the last name here of the spouse, that is, so this is the information of the applicant's spouse. Last name, first name, middle name if applicable. In this case, the applicant's spouse does not have a middle name, so we put not applicable or any to indicate that. Current spouse's date of birth. So again, we are putting the date of birth of the applicant's spouse here and the date you entered into marriage with your current spouse. Is your current spouse's present physical address the same as your physical address? You indicate here accordingly. In this case, we see yes. And if you answered no, provide address in part 14, additional information. Number 5A, when did your current spouse become a U.S. citizen? So right here, we are indicating by birth in the United States. So because we select this response, then we are going to go to item number 7. If you select this response, other, you're required to complete item number 5B. So because we selected by birth in the United States, we are going to go to number 7. So number 7. How many times has your current spouse been married? So we see that in this case, it's one time. Let's see what they say here. See the specific instructions by item number section of the instructions for more information about which marriages to include. Provide divorce decrees, annulment decrees, or death certificates showing that all of your spouse's prior marriages were terminated if applicable. So it would not be applicable in this case since this person has only been married once. Current spouse's current employer or company. Only answer item number 8 if you are currently filing under Part 1, item number 1D, spouse of U.S. citizen in qualified employment outside the United States. This right here is not applicable. So take that as a correction for form N-400, question 8. Only answer item number 8 if you are filing under Part 1, item number D, spouse of U.S. citizen in qualified employment. Information about your children. Indicate your total number of children under 18 years of age. We see that there are no kids involved. Move on to number 2. Provide the following information about your children identified in item 1. So this would not be applicable to this applicant since there are no children involved. So in the spaces, we are going to indicate NA or not applicable. Let's read this information just for thoroughness. For the residence and relationship columns, you must type or print one of the valid options listed. If any of your children do not reside with you, provide addresses where those children live. In Part 14, additional information. If you have more than 3 children, use the space provided in Part 14, additional information. We're moving on to Part 7, information about your employment and schools you attended. List where you have worked or attended school, full-time or part-time during the last 5 years, if you are filing based on the general provision under Part 1. In this case, since we are filing as the applicant or spouse of a U.S. citizen, we are required to list our schooling information or employment information during the last 3 years instead of 5. In this case, we see the applicant's employer's name. So the applicant is listing an employer and not a school. So this is the employer's name, the employer's address, and date of employment to current. In this case, we see that this one employer accounts for the entire 3-year period that we are required to show. We're moving on to Part 8, time outside of the United States. List below all the trips you have taken outside the United States during, so in our case, it would be during the last 3 years. If you are filing, so they tell you 5 years based on the category under which you are filing. So in our case, we are listing for the last 3 years. So we see that this applicant took only one trip, and that was in December of 2023, and returned in the same month, and she traveled to Trinidad. Part 9, additional information about you. When a question includes the word ever, you must provide information about any of your actions or conduct that occurred anywhere in the world at any time unless the question specifies otherwise. If you answer yes to any of the questions in item numbers 1 to 14 in Part 9, item numbers 1 to 14 provide explanations and any additional information in the space provided in Part 14, additional information. Number 1, have you ever claimed to be a U.S. citizen in writing or any other way? And we see the relevant responses here. And you could go ahead and read through these in your own time. Read them carefully and select what's applicable to you. Each person will have different things applicable to them, so it's important for you to go along and read through them carefully to see what applies to you. We're continuing with the questions. Additional information continues, and they are asking you to state if you answer yes to any part of item number 15 below. Complete the table below with each crime or offense, even if your records have been sealed, expunged, or otherwise cleared. You must disclose this information even if someone, including a judge, law enforcement officer, or attorney, told you that it is no longer on your record, or told you that you do not have to disclose the information. If you need extra space, use the space provided in Part 14, additional information. Submit evidence to support your answers with your Form N-400. Include all the crimes and offenses in the United States or anywhere in the world, including domestic violence, driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and crimes and offenses while you are under 18 years of age. We are going to get into the information here. Which you ever committed, agreed to commit, or asked someone else to commit, were arrested, cited, detained, or confined by any law enforcement officer, military official in the U.S. or elsewhere, or immigration official, were charged with committing, helping commit, or trying to commit, pled guilty to, were convicted of, were placed in alternative sentencing or a rehabilitative program for example, diversion, deferred prosecution, withheld adjudication, or deferred adjudication, or received a suspended sentence, elementary amnesty or pardon for, or were placed on probation or paroled for. 15A, have you ever committed, agreed to commit, asked someone else to commit, helped commit, or tried to commit a crime or offense for which you were not arrested? You're going to answer as applicable to you. Have you ever been arrested, cited, detained, or confined by any law enforcement officer, military official in the U.S. or elsewhere, or immigration official for any reason, or been charged with a crime or offense? Answer as applicable to you. In this box, you are required to state what was the crime or offense you committed, date of the crime or offense, date of your conviction or guilty plea, place of crime or offense, what was the result or disposition of the arrest, citation, or charge, what was your sentence. So if you answered yes to anything that would be applicable to be entered in this section, then you would place or provide the information as appropriate. Number 16, if you received suspended sentence, were placed on probation, or were paroled, have you completed your suspended sentence, probation, or parole? Since this applicant answered no, then this section would not be applicable. So we would not answer to any of this. So it would not be a yes or a no situation, since the applicant was not convicted of any offense or any of these situations as outlined here. If you answer yes to any of the questions in item numbers 17A to 19, provide an explanation in the space provided in part 14, additional information. Submit evidence to support your answers. Part 9, additional information about you continued. Have you ever, and again, they ask a bunch of questions here. You are required to go through them individually and select the correct response that's applicable to you, whether it be yes or no. We see where this applicant, the response is no for all these, and we're continuing. And again, they say if you answer yes to item numbers 20 to 21 below, provide an explanation in the space provided in part 14, additional information, and see the specific instructions by item number part 9, additional information about you, of the instructions for more information. Number 20, have you ever been placed in removal, recession, or deportation proceedings? Answer accordingly. Have you ever been removed or deported from the United States? Select what's applicable to you. Federal law requires nearly all people born as male who are either U.S. citizens or immigrants, 18 through 25 years of age, to register with Selective Service. Number 22A, are you a person born as a male who lived in the United States at any time between your 18th and 26th birthdays? Do not select yes if you were a lawful non-immigrant for all of that time period. So select what's applicable. If you answered yes to item number 22A, did you register for the Selective Service? So since we answered no to 22A, then we are not going to provide a response to this. Number 22C, if you answered yes. So we did not answer yes, so we would not need to provide a response to any of this. If it's applicable to you, you would respond accordingly. Date registered Selective Service number. So since this is not applicable to this applicant, then we indicate this in the boxes. If you answered no to item number 22B, see the specific instructions by item number part 9, additional information about you, of the instructions for more information. We did not provide a response to 22B since it was not applicable to the applicant. If you answered no to item number 22B, then this section here would be applicable to you. If you answer yes to item numbers 23 to 24, provide an explanation in the space provided. And that is in part 14, additional information. You would need to provide that explanation. Have you ever left the United States to avoid being drafted in the U.S. Armed Forces? Applicant in this case is no. 24, have you ever applied for any kind of exemption from military services in the U.S. Armed Forces? No for this applicant. Have you ever served in the U.S. Armed Forces? No for this applicant. Moving on. Part 9, additional information about you continued. If you answered no to item number 25, go to item number 30. So item number 25, let's go back to see what that said. Have you ever served in the U.S. Armed Forces? So we answered no to that. So we are going to go to item number 30. If your answer is yes, then you would need to provide information for these sections prior to going on to number 30A. Excuse me. Do you now have, or did you ever have, a hereditary title or an order of nobility in any foreign country? So for this applicant, it's no. And nobility would mean some esteemed title. If you answered yes to item number 30A, are you willing to give up any inherited titles or orders of nobility? If this doesn't apply to you, as in this case, we would write NA or type in if the computer allows us to do so. If you answer no to any question except item number 33, see the Oath of Allegiance section of the instructions for more information. So we are going to go to number 31. Do you support the Constitution and form of government of the United States? Once you are seeking to become a U.S. citizen, then your answer to this should be yes. Do you understand the full oath of allegiance of the United States? Again, you should have an understanding before completing this form, and your answer should be yes, because it is a requirement for becoming a U.S. citizen, so that you know exactly and agree to what you are applying for. 33. Are you unable to take the oath of allegiance because of a physical or developmental disability or mental impairment? This applicant is no. If you answer yes, skip item numbers 34 to 37 and see the legal guardian surrogate or designated representative section in the instructions. So since the answer is not yes for this applicant, we are going to continue to 34. Are you willing to take the full oath of allegiance to the United States? Again, you should be willing to, since you're applying to become a U.S. citizen. If the law requires it, are you willing to bear arms, that is, carry weapons on behalf of the United States? So we would want to say yes for this. If the law requires it, are you willing to perform non-combatant services? That is, do something that does not include fighting in war in the U.S. Armed Forces. And yes, we would want to do so since we are applying to become a U.S. citizen. 37. If the law requires it, are you willing to perform work of national importance under civilian direction? That is, do non-military work that the U.S. government says is important to the country. And yes, we would want to agree to that since we are applying to become a U.S. citizen. We're moving on to part 10. Request for a fee reduction. So for information about fees, fee waivers, and reduced fees, see Form G 1055. See schedule at www.uscis.gov/G-1055. To apply for a reduced fee, complete item numbers 1, 5B. If you are not eligible for a reduced fee, complete item number 1 and proceed to part 11. If you are applying for a fee reduction, then you are going to be completing this section, or any type of fee waivers. My household income is less than or equal to 400% of the federal poverty guidelines. See instructions for required documentation. So you'd want to visit this site here to see the instruction. If you are not applying for a fee waiver, then you are going to ignore the entire section here from number 1 to 5B. You could even put not applicable in these boxes. Part 11, applicant's contact information, certification, and signature. Applicant's contact information. Provide your daytime telephone number, mobile telephone number, if any, and email address, if any. So if you have your daytime telephone number, you're going to put it here. Applicant's mobile telephone number here. If you have any of this information, note that in this case, this applicant's daytime telephone number and mobile, they are one and the same. So your telephone number, your daytime telephone number could definitely be your mobile number. And you are required to put your email address in this box, if any. I mean, you would want to definitely have a way for the USCIS to contact you outside of sending you a letter or even creating an online account. Sometimes it is just probably more efficient for you to have a telephone number and email address to provide or submit with your application. Applicant certification and signature. So you are going to be reading this section to make sure that you understand what you are signing and also certifying that you have provided the correct information and authorized all the responses contained in the form. After reading, make sure to sign the form. You are required to place the date that you sign the form, and it is extremely important that you do not forget to sign your form after printing. We're continuing. We're at part 12. Just a gentle reminder here to always provide your alien number on the page in the space provided. If you used an interpreter, then this is where the information for the interpreter would go. In this situation, there was no interpreter used, so we are going to indicate not applicable in all the boxes or spaces provided. And we are doing that for the entire section. After printing your form, you could go ahead and write not applicable in this section here. Preparer's full name. So preparer in this case is referring to someone other than the applicant. So if you had someone else prepare the form for you, then you would want to put their information here. Since this applicant did not use a preparer, then that is why we indicated not applicable in these spaces. Again, once the form is printed, you are going to place NA in this section. Part 14 is additional information. So if you did not have enough space for any section previously completed, then this is where you would provide that additional information. And what you could do based on the number of pages or space that you require, if needs be, you could print several of this part 14 page so that you have adequate space to write in your additional information. Make sure to place your alien number here on each page, your family name, last name, given name, first name that is, and your middle name. Also the page number, the part number, and item number for each additional information if applicable, so that the information can be easily referenced by the officer reviewing your information. In this case, the applicant does not have any additional information, so we indicate NA. You could even draw a line once the form is printed across the page and put NA if you do not have any additional information. So you want to note here carefully, do not complete parts 15 or 16 until the USCIS officer instructs you to do so at the interview. So here is part 15, signature at interview. So of course this is straightforward. You are required to sign at the interview. Part 16 is the oath of allegiance, and that also is going to be happening at your interview. So this is it, Form N-400, application for naturalization. Remember to log in at www.uscis.gov to see the guidelines to complete the form. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.